Good evening, good evening. I hope you've had a really good day. I hope it continues to be a good night. I wanted to hop on here because I just thought of a word that I'd love to share with you. I've recently posted a couple of videos about trauma, abuse, and neglect, and a word came to me recently that I love to talk about in therapy. I see a lot of my clients have experienced this, and I think a lot of our generation and prior generations experienced this without even really knowing what it was or having a word for it. So I think we should add that to our little vocabulary. This word is parentification. So the root is parent, and then parentification is essentially when you are a child, so you are under the age of 18, you are supposed to be learning, you are not very aware of what it takes to be an adult, what relationships entail, what kind of responsibilities and accountabilities you need to hold as a parent. And essentially it is when you are a child, you take on those responsibilities that your parent should be responsible for. So what's interesting about this word or this experience in general is that it can look in a variety of ways. So parentification can happen on a physicality level, it can happen on an emotional level, it can happen in kind of a dynamic role. It really is very diverse, and it's very variable depending on, the context and what kind of climate you grew up in. I want to throw a couple examples out there for you just so you kind of can understand a little bit better what I mean. One really obvious one that I think a lot of people have experienced is when you are suddenly responsible for a child. So let's say like you are the older sibling and you have 2 or 3 really young siblings, and you essentially are caring for that baby. Like you raised that baby, you changed the baby, you fed the baby, you put the baby down for a nap. And mom was working, or mom wasn't available, or maybe mom was so busy with all the other kids, like she just needed help with this one. And not that you can't help with a child, don't get me wrong, but there's a difference between helping and essentially being the sole provider, right? Or another great example would be parents who rely on their child to go and do part-time jobs and earn money to bring in to pay bills. A child should not have to be responsible for helping the function and the financial means of the household in general. They are a child. That is an adult responsibility. So putting on an adult responsibility to a child is parentification. Another really good example of this happens in an emotional setting. So sometimes a child is vented to as a therapist, or a child is always the one who has to mediate emotions or navigate conflicts within the family. A child does not know those skills yet. They are just barely learning those skills. And if they seem to do really well in those skills, it's because essentially their body is turning into, their brain is going into survival mode, is saying like, what do I need to do to diffuse the situation, to make the situation better? And is really just operating out of instinct. So any kind of reliance on a child in that kind of emotional capacity is also emotional parentification. Another thing that I've seen a lot is that I have very often coached clients through situations where their parentification looked like role playing in a family that wasn't their role to play. So for instance, they are the daughter, they are the son, they are the child in the dynamic, and maybe they are looked at as a spouse, whether that mean they are vented to for household functioning things, or for the other spouse, like your dad doesn't do this thing, or even that they are like taking on that emotional burden of trying to support mom or dad in being able to like parent the whole household in general, as well as like, again, suffice that emotional attachment in order for that other parent to feel like they can go on and continue supporting the household. So lots of different ways that this can look. It's going to be very specific to you and your context, obviously, but I do think that that's a really important term to have in our vocabulary. A lot of us experience issues and ideas and just problems in general that we didn't need to be experiencing as a child. It was just too much pressure. It was too much of a too large of a concept for us to even understand, and suddenly we're thrown into kind of a conflict resolution situation where we have no idea even what the conflict is. So if you've ever experienced that, there's a word for it, there's a reason for it. It does fall under abusive actions, unfortunately, abusive, neglectful actions. And sometimes it's not intentional, but regardless, impact always over intention. So if it's something you've dealt with, just know that you're not alone. It's a very common experience, unfortunately, and hopefully we can do better and know what is age appropriate for children as we move into those spaces.